What is up, everybody? This is Paul here, and in this video I want to talk about what to look for if you're decided that, hey, you know what, I want to buy a new wireless microphone system, kind of some guidelines and recommendations on what to look for, and also hopefully I can clear up some commonly asked questions and common misconceptions about wireless mics. So now I want to talk a little bit about the different types of microphones that you can find. And I realize this is a little bit later into the video, but in general for transmitters, there are two main types. There's your handheld transmitter, and this also includes your plug-on transmitters that go into a handheld microphone. And you also have a body pack transmitter. And for vocals, this body pack transmitter can either be plugged into a head-worn microphone that goes over someone's ear, or a lapel microphone that clips onto their their shirt or something like that, or shirt pocket that picks up them talking. Now, if I'm doing wedding ceremonies, I actually think a head-worn mic is better because you're getting the microphone closer to the officiant's mouth than a lapel mic where it can be farther away. And this means you can increase the gain before feedback a lot because your microphone is closer to the source of sound. And I actually prefer omnidirectional mics for ceremonies because this means you can also pick up the bride and groom if they're talking within about a shoulder length or an arm's length of the officiant. Whereas opposed to a lapel, maybe a lapel would be potentially better at picking up the bride and groom, but then you also have the issue of getting feedback. So in my opinion, the head-worn is a sweet spot. The body pack transmitter will send a signal from either a head-worn or a lapel mic. And this will either be via, plugging it in via micro XLR, or maybe even something like the Sennheiser, which uses something that's similar to an 1/8 inch or mini TRS that kind of screws in and locks. So a lot of you guys are probably wondering, well, what mics do I use and I recommend? And personally, I use two actually different types of mics for receptions or just general DJing and for ceremonies. So one of my favorites is the Audix R62. This is kind of what it looks like. It's a dual receiver, which means you can use two handhelds or two body packs, or a handheld and a body pack, something like that, some combination of those. But it's in one single 1U rack mounted interface that I have mounted in a rack with my mixer. And these offer 10 milliwatts and 30 milliwatt power, switchable power on the transmitters, which means if you know you're going to be shooting kind of farther away, you can bump up the gain to 30 milliwatts. I've never personally felt like I've had to do that in the time I've had these, but you can, and it gives you that option. And the bandwidth is between 522 and 586 megahertz. And this bandwidth is really important because the larger bandwidth you have, the more you can kind of escape instances where there's a lot of interference and there's a very big noise floor. So this is about a 64 megahertz wide spectrum, and that's pretty darn good. After that, you start getting up into issues where you want to get different sized antennas because the antenna length is going to be dependent on the frequencies that you're trying to receive. Just like in with DJ speakers, an 18-inch subwoofer is only going to be great at reproducing low frequencies, and a 3-inch tweeter isn't going to be great at reproducing, down to 50 hertz. Different frequencies require different sized antennas or receivers or cones to pick and send those things up, and the same goes exactly with these wireless microphone systems. And you can get these for about $1,200 for a dual receiver or $700 for a single handheld. And this $1,200 will include this receiver and two handheld microphones. So it's actually a pretty good deal. Or you can just get like half of one of these, which includes a handheld transmitter and the receiver for $700. The reason I like these is these have a range of perhaps over 450 feet. And I've actually stepped this off with a buddy of mine, DJ Dave, who I've been mentioning before, and he's gotten way more than 450 feet, from his garage, stepping this off, with line of sight or potentially shooting through a garage door. So that's pretty good. The only thing is with these mics, I find you just need to scan them every so often before toast. That's the only thing. But they're great mics and they've been performing really well. And I like the fact that you can get two in sort of a 1U component without having to use any antenna combiner or anything like that. The other mics that I use are the Sennheiser G4, and I use these specifically in the AW Plus band. And this is actually what these look like. So it's kind of weird. This is the transmitter, and this is the receiver, and they look almost exactly the same. And unlike the R62, which uses sort of a DC power that you plug in the wall, these both take AA batteries. And this is great because I can have these sitting on top of my speakers for ceremony without having to run an extra power cable to them, and I can get that line of sight that I was talking about before. So these actually offer switchable, so in each transmitter you can pick between 10 milliwatts, 30 milliwatts, or 50 milliwatts. And 50 milliwatts is actually the max you can use that the FCC allows without having a special license to transmit, which I don't know any DJs who are like, I want to use 100 milliwatts, I'm going to get a license from the FCC. Most people don't do it. So it's nice. Each transmitter, you can kind of choose how much RF power you want to send. It uses FM modulation from 470 to 558 megahertz. And once again, pretty wide band, a lot of different tunable frequencies. And you can find this for about $900 for a single transmitter and receiver. So this kind of pair that also includes the lapel mic, you can find for $900. So quite a little bit more expensive than the Audix R62, but it ends up, I find that this system ends up giving me the best performance. I've had the least problems with this set out of any of them, and I definitely recommend this a lot. There's also the Sennheiser G4, this is the EW500. There's also the EW100, which it offers half the bandwidth, and it maybe only offers 10 milliwatts, and I think 10 and 30. And those you can find for maybe $500 for a transmitter and receiver. Those are great too for DJs. I just liked having the extra spectrum and like having kind of the extra power option. So that's why I spent a little bit more money. And the other nice thing about these is you can use these to send a wireless signal from your mixer to potentially a satellite speaker. Let's say you're doing cocktail hour if it's a wedding, or you're having side fills if you're doing a larger event. You can use these to send audio signal. They basically send the full spectrum, unlike the Alto Stealth. So these are a great alternative to those. You can use them both as lapel mics. They even have handheld versions or the plug-on transmitters. But you can also use them to send an audio frequency signal from your mixer to a satellite speaker, or from another speaker to an external side fill. Now, when you're thinking about buying a mic, there are a couple things you want to look for. I'm not saying you have to buy those mics, even though those are what I use and I recommend. And there are plenty of other mics that I've used that I don't recommend. But if you're thinking about buying a mic, here's some good general guidelines to look at. The first and most important thing is, what frequency do you want your wireless microphone to take up? You cannot buy anything if you're in the United States between 617 and 652 megahertz and 663 to 698 megahertz. Those are the new frequencies that have been recently banned by the FCC because T-Mobile has lobbied the federal government to buy more of the TV station spectrum so that they can use it for their cellular service. So then the TV stations are squished into smaller ranges, and then the FCC bans, DJs and anybody using any other parts of the spectrum that are unused that the TV stations are using now. So those are the new ones that are not allowed. And anything, of course, 700 megahertz plus is also not allowed, but that's kind of been in effect for a while. And it'd be probably hard to buy a system now, especially if you're getting something new that's 700 megahertz plus. And it goes without saying, do not try to buy a system from 617 to 698, thinking you can operate between 652 and 663. That is not worth your money. You want to get something below probably 600 megahertz. And if you look at the systems I have, these are in the upper 400s to mid upper 500s megahertz. And in my opinion, the lower the better, because more things are going to be sold. The first things that are going to be sold are going to be the higher frequencies, as we've seen before. 700 megahertz, now they're encroaching onto 600 megahertz. Next thing will probably be maybe 550 or even 500 megahertz above. You want to try to get it as low as possible. And of course, the larger bandwidth you have, the more flexibility you have if you're operating in a setting where there are a lot of TV stations or a lot of interference. So the more range of frequencies you have, the easier it is to scan and find a free channel that's not going to be taken up by anything. Another thing I will mention is lower frequencies generally travel a little bit better, and it means line of sight is somewhat less necessary. It's one of the reasons why 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, while not as fast as, let's say, 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, has a little bit better range. Now, this is true about EM waves in general, but if you're, let's say, comparing, should I get a 400 megahertz or a 500 megahertz system, that's not that big of an issue. The difference between 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz is not only 10 times more than these guys, but it's also going to be the difference between a factor of 2. I think really the difference between 400 and 500 megahertz is not that different. And if anything, I would say check the local TV stations in your area. If you go to the Sennheiser website, they have a great sort of app that'll tell you the TV stations and what frequencies they're operating at and which ones are free. I think it's generally better to try to optimize for that in the area you're going to be working, as opposed to I want to get the lowest one possible because it might give me slightly more range. I think, honestly, at the frequencies we're looking at, that's going to be pretty negligible. And I also, and this is kind of controversial, but I also would not recommend Wi-Fi mics. So these are microphones that operate at 2.4 gigahertz. Now in theory, these can perform really well, and I know a lot of people who use them, but first of all, you're gonna have more issues with the sort of distance thing we were talking about, as opposed to 400 or 500 megahertz. And the other issue that you're gonna have with Wi-Fi mics is there are only in the United States about, I think, 13 open Wi-Fi channels that are available. So if you're in a room where everyone's using their phone and there's a lot of Wi-Fi, let's say it's a hotel or something, they could be using multiple bands, and it can be really hard to find an open channel in the Wi-Fi setting. And additionally, you don't really get to choose for most of these Wi-Fi mics, because Wi-Fi chooses their channels automatically. So you may not even have control over that, and you may just be screwed. Whereas with a microphone that's operating between 600 and 700 megahertz, you can generally find something that's gonna work. And one thing I should mention is whether you're getting an analog or digital microphone, these are still gonna have the same sort of ideas of a carrier frequency and the same spectrum. So it's not like a digital mics are only gonna work at 2.4 gigahertz. I think that's pretty obvious, but it's definitely worth mentioning. The next thing you want to look for, of course, is your transmitter power, because higher power can actually overcome difficult places like Houston, Texas, and big urban areas where there's a lot of things transmitting, and you need to offer more power to kind of get yourself above all the information that's being transmitted. So this may mean getting a microphone that, in addition to offering 10 milliwatts, also offers 30 or potentially even 50 milliwatts. And this is also important if you want to be operating in an area where you're going to be, let's say, shooting 400 feet away. You're going to want more transmitter power than if you're just trying to shoot 30 feet away, or a wireless mic that's just being used behind the DJ booth. The next thing it's really important to have is what's called true diversity. And this basically means your two antennas are picking up the same signal, and it just basically chooses the one that has the best receive signal. So if you're going to have a dropout, it means both antennas would have to fail. And usually this means that the issue you're having with dropouts is more of an issue of distance or line of sight than it is with something called multipath interference, which is what true diversity helps with. Which, once again, multipath interference is if I'm here with the transmitter at point A and then my receiver's at point B, I'm receiving the signal and I'm also receiving a reflected signal from a wall or the floor or something, and these end up destructively interfering to the point that I end up not getting anything. It's very unlikely that these are both going to happen at a received signal from both antennas if you're using a true diversity receiver. So try to get a true diversity. There's some that are like half diversity or something like that, and I wouldn't recommend those. I would say try to get true diversity. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're considering adding or expanding additional systems, let's say you're a DJ, but you're also sometimes doing corporate AV work, or you're running sound for bands or something like that, or doing rentals, think about the fact that you may want to be able to get a system that's expandable. So let's say you're doing an event at a car show and you need 600 feet of range. Maybe you want a system that you can also hook up paddle antennas to, and you can place those around so that you don't have to worry about range like that, even though you wouldn't do that at most sort of DJ events or weddings or small parties and things where you're only needing, 200 feet or less. Once again, I wouldn't recommend these for smaller events, but it's nice to have a system that could potentially be networked if you're working in a larger setting. So keep that in mind. If that's something that's you're looking into down the road, it might be worth buying a system that's expandable, where you can get antenna combiners, remote antennas like I was talking about with paddle antennas, or even sort of like the ability to network them together with Ethernet cables if that's something you're looking at doing in the future. And finally is cost. I just don't think you should be spending like a ton of money. For most DJs, I don't think it's worth paying more than $1,000 for a single receiver transmitter pair. Sure, it has their QLXD out there, which is I think $1,700 for a receiver transmitter pair, and I just don't think that that's worth it. It's an excellent microphone. I've personally had more problems with those than some of the cheaper mics that I own, so that's why I'm not really always necessarily recommending it, but it's a great mic system, and I know so many DJs who swear by it and they love it, so I'm not necessarily discouraging people from getting that. It's just, in my own experience, I've had better luck with, even though this is a digital system, with an analog system like Sennheiser EW500. So keep that in mind, and those are kind of some of the buying guides if you're looking to buy new microphones. Now, one thing that's sort of important to notice, if you're using an analog microphone, it's super important to have a feature called squelch, and most microphones will have them, but if you're not sure, talk to the person you're buying from, talk to the store, or look in the manual or something in the description and see if it has squelch, because squelch is super important. And basically what this means is if you somehow lose power to your receiver, if your transmitter gets far enough away from the receiver, or there's like so many bodies in the way that the signal completely drops out on the receiver end, it knows to sort of cut the signal entirely and not output whatever it does demodulate, because otherwise what happens is you end up getting this huge, really loud static for several seconds or until the receiver's back in the line of sight. And this can mean, let's say the officiant is like a pastor, and a lot of these pastors work at these systems that use, thousands and thousands of dollars of wireless systems. They're done, just to force a habit, they're going to turn the transmitter off to save the battery because they're trying to be nice to you. And then all of a sudden this super loud static comes out because the receiver is still trying to decode a signal that isn't there. And that's where you get this noise, because it's ending up decoding and amplifying noise and other sort of interference that's happening. So what squelch does is it basically says once a signal goes below a certain level, once the received signal is below a certain amount, just cut it out completely. And setting squelch is kind of an important thing, and that's almost a topic for another video, where you can actually set what dB that the squelch is operating on so that you don't end up picking up any sort of stray frequencies. You don't want to have any noise, but you also don't want to be sort of getting dropouts simply because you're transmitting from far away and it thinks that it should be turning it off when it shouldn't be. So the next thing I want to talk about is like this wireless microphone chart, and this is adapted from EV or Electro Voice, the speaker company, and they had this chart, and I actually liked it quite a bit to kind of give you the difference between how much you'd pay per receiver transmitter pair and what frequencies you should expect to have, and kind of where the sweet spot is. And this is kind of a good chart. So on this left-hand column, you have your entry-level microphones. Generally, you wouldn't want to use these for anything more than 150 feet. And the idea is you're just going to be mainly using this behind the DJ booth. Maybe you have an MC that's coming with you and they're talking on the mic behind the DJ booth, but they're not going to be, out 100 or 200 feet away where you're needing that crucial sort of quality there. And likely, not going to have a lot of interference rejection. They're not going to have true diversity. And the frequency range is going to be pretty small, so you can't really pick a lot of channels. Next up, you have your mid-level microphones, and these are actually the ones that I would not recommend an entry-level microphone for something like a wedding or any sort of situation where you're actually having announcements being made that are super important to hear, that are critical, that can't just be, shouted out, or if it goes out, it's not the end of the world. Now, your mid-level wireless microphones include things like Sennheiser G3, G4, and some of the Shure models, I think, would be the BLX. And these are great for things that are in the same room, and you can use these for toasts and the general wedding receptions. But if you're doing weddings, for ceremonies, it's unclear if this is something you necessarily always want to rely on. And likely these are going to add a larger frequency range and a good number of channels. So this is a good kind of sweet spot for especially beginner DJs and people who are just going to want a nice solid wireless mic that it's going to do well, but isn't going to break the bank for them. Next up, we have our high performance mics. So this would be like the Sennheiser G3, G4, and some other, maybe the Shure QLXD, and what's the other one? The QLXD and the ULXD. Those are two kind of good high performance mics. These likely are going to have about the same frequency range as your mid-level microphones and not really add too much more interference rejection, but they're likely going to have increased range because they're going to be using more high quality components, and likely you're going to have some extra features like networking that you're not going to see in your mid-level microphone. So these you can actually probably use to expand. And then on this hand, you have on kind of the right-hand side, you have your tour grade microphones. Likely you're not going to have a larger frequency range as your high performance, and potentially even less, because these are more geared towards a permanent install or a situation where you know what frequencies you're going to be using because you're in the same building every time. And a lot of times you'll have these specifically built by a company like Shure or by, Sennheiser and spec'd, and you're going to have a professional come out there and spec out the system and find out what the best system is, so that way you don't need to have anybody there. So I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend these for mobile DJs. I think they're kind of unnecessary. Now, if you're doing a lot of corporate AV systems, or you're doing concerts for other people and they have technical writers, maybe you'll see things here. So Sennheiser has their EM6000, Shure has their Axient Digital, which is a great system, but once again, very, very expensive. and I think that money is better spent elsewhere. Finally, what I want to do is cover a couple common misconceptions that people have with the wireless systems, and just kind of clear up any sort of last minute questions that people may have. Of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to comment. I'll leave a comment here and I'll be happy to answer them if I can. But these are just kind of a few that I kind of anticipate people coming up with. First of all, is can I sync 2 or more transmitters to one receiver? So let's say I'm in a room and I have, let's say I'm doing a wedding ceremony and I have somebody who's going to be doing a reading, and they're going to have a handheld microphone and an officiant that's going to be using let's say an over-ear microphone with a body pack. Well, why don't I just use one receiver and turn both of these to the same transmitter? That's going to work, right? Absolutely not. At least not with digital or FM. Maybe with an AM system potentially, but you do not want to turn two systems to the same receiver, or 2 transmitters to the same receiver, because the way demodulation works, it gets kind of confused because it's only expecting one signal. It's not linear, which basically means you can't just add 2 things together and expect the output to be the result of adding them together. And the best thing to do is if you're curious about this or you still don't believe me, try it out and you will quickly understand why I do not recommend this. But definitely do not try to do this in like a live setting. And the next question, can I sync one transmitter to 2 or more receivers? Which basically means, can I have one transmitter transmitting and then I have a receiver in one room and let's say a receiver in another? And maybe this is a common thing if, let's say, I want to send a wireless signal to 2 side fills and one's way out to the left and one is way out to the right. And this is absolutely something you can do because the receivers are not sending the same signal. You're sending one signal out and you're just having 2 receivers that are picking up the signal. And this is really important because when you think about what's actually going on, transmitters are the ones sending, right? So if you have 2 transmitters sending at the same frequency, they're going to interfere. But if you have one transmitter that's sending and 2 receivers picking up, all the receivers are doing are receiving and demodulating. They're not sending any signal. They're not going to cause any interference with each other. So that's totally possible. And this is actually what I often use in cases where I have 2 side fills and you want to kind of send the signal. And I use the Sennheiser G4 for this. I'll use 2 receivers sent to the same carrier frequency and 1 transmitter sending the same audio signal out. The next question is, can cell phones or Wi-Fi signals interfere with my radio frequency microphones? Now, of course, if you're using a Wi-Fi microphone, this absolutely can happen. And even your wireless, Wi-Fi DMX transmitters can cause interference. In general, no. If they're transmitting at different frequencies, you're not going to have any issues with interference with cell phones because those bands don't interact. However, if you're using sort of poor malfunctioning cell phones or poorly designed components in your receivers, it's possible that the cell phones or your receivers or whatever, your transmitters are sending out other frequencies besides the ones that you want to pick up. And in those cases, it is possible that you can have interference. And other issues are, power supplies and cables can sometimes cause EM interference. And this just has to do with the fact that you're using electronics that are, operating at frequencies that might be kind of similar to what's going on. Maybe not a power supply, but maybe you're having a high power computer or other sort of magnets. All of these things can cause electromagnetic interference as well. So keep those in mind. But more often than not, cell phones and Wi-Fi signals are not interfering. Usually if you think it's an issue with Wi-Fi or with people's cell phones, it's because there's so many people in the room and you don't have line of sight. That's usually what the main issue is, and not the fact that there are cell phones transmitting nearby. And another question is, well, why is it harder to get a good signal than 10 years ago? Let's say you've been DJing for 20 years and you're wondering, it was so easy. I would just show up and turn on the mic and they would work. Well, there are a couple of reasons for this. Cell phone companies, once again, as we talked about earlier, they're going to lobby the FCC and buy the frequency range that they can use, and TV stations are going to be squished. So they're no longer a bunch of open channels. One thing that's really interesting too, as TV stations are being switched to digital, basically there are fewer open frequencies between bands. So back in the old days with TV, the spectrum was very sort of what's called sparse. There were just a lot of peaks and a couple peaks, and then there were a bunch of zeros everywhere. And actually, going from black and white TV to color TV will actually use the same spectrum. They were able to fit the color kind of in the gaps. Whereas with digital, there aren't as many gaps because digital ends up using the entire spectrum. So that's why it's going to be a lot harder to get a good signal than X years ago, which is why it's important to have a good performing microphone system now. And a lot of these tips are going to be a lot more important now than they were 10 years ago because it's simply harder to get that good performance nowadays. A few more frequently asked questions. Why don't I have to tune Wi-Fi on my computer or device if it's also an EM wave, right? We're talking about carriers and demodulators. Don't we have to do this? And actually, Wi-Fi kind of does this automatically. You don't really have to worry about it. In the US, there are only 12 Wi-Fi channels available at 2.4 gigahertz. So basically, devices can scan these few channels and just find the best one that's open, and it'll just kind of do that automatically. Whereas with TV and radio stations, basically these frequencies, they're not really set. Whereas with Wi-Fi, it's like this channel, this channel, this channel are these specific ranges. TV and radio stations, they're just taking up random spectra based on different areas, and it's not necessarily consistent. So that's why it doesn't really make sense. In addition to there being a larger bandwidth, it is harder to sort of enforce when there's not really set bands for TV stations and radios anyway. You can go on Sennheiser's website and see a local chart of TV stations in your areas, which in some ways is like manually tuning the bands in and of itself. And you'll kind of see certain bands will take up different frequencies, and then as you're a certain distance away, they'll interfere less. So just it's a little bit more complicated, and that's why you don't have to tune Wi-Fi. And finally, the last question, and this is a good question, is how do I know if my new mics won't also be outdated? And the answer is, unfortunately, you don't. And there's no guarantee, especially as 5G starts to roll in, and that's going to be taking up more spectrum anyway because bandwidth is going to be an issue. Also, as self-driving cars start to become a thing, those are sending, terabytes and terabytes of data every minute. So those are going to need more bandwidth as well, and TV stations are going to be squished more and more. But at the same time, I think now's not the worst time to buy a new system, because even if the government wanted to take up more spectrum due to bureaucracy, due to all these issues, the government is just going to take a time for the government to do things. So by the time they even set in stone what they want to take up, it's going to be a number of years. And by the time you're going to at least have a decent return of investment on mics. And most of these companies are offering like a trade-in program if you own mics that are in like the old range. So you don't necessarily want to bank on that, but also keep in mind, you're not necessarily going to be making a $2,000 investment now and expect that to be like tomorrow it's illegal to use it. So kind of the other thing. Anyway, that's all I really have. I know this has kind of gone on a long time, but if you have any questions or want any clarification on anything else, I'm happy to provide it. Otherwise, I hope this video was helpful and you learned something at least about how wireless systems work and how to get the best performance out of your system. And hopefully you guys like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll try to be posting more videos. And let me know if there's anything else you guys want to see, any other topics you want me to cover. All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye.